And today we are covering A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
Might as well do that one again, right?
Oh, no. We translated it into Russian. We're doing The Young Tsar's Dream by Leo Tolstoy.
Dreaming of a young Tsar. I got nothing.
And welcome to the CodeX Cantina, where I am Una.
And I am Christmas Crypto.
If you are new to the Codex Cantina, we go heavy into the literature that we read. Today we are doing The Young Tsar's Dream by Leo Tolstoy. If you are down for literature discussions, please make sure you hit that subscribe button.
And as always, we start off with publication information. The Young Tsar was published in 1894. And we will leave a link in the description below for you to be able to read this story for free.
Now, our copy of A Very Russian Christmas lists that the translator is unknown. I went and looked it up actually on Gutenberg. And it also said unknown. I kind of feel like this is like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow story, where it's just like, I heard this somewhere. Like, this is like whispers on the playground, but no one wants to admit that who translated it.
So maybe somebody doesn't want to get in trouble.
Well, I wasn't the translator because, when he put his hand on his head, the guy's like, hey, how are we going to do this? And he said, this is how. I would have translated it as, this is the way.
Touche. That's good.
So why are we doing a month-long experience of foreign stories for Christmas? Well, we read the same Christmas stories, watch the same Christmas movies year after year, and while that's a great comfort, we also think it's important to explore maybe how other cultures explore Christmas.
Yeah, I think it's important to see how other cultures interpret and what it means to them, and that sometimes our view is a little bit biased on the outlooks that we have or what we want it to make us feel. So I'm really excited that we've gotten to read all of these Russian stories and see other viewpoints on this very important holiday to billions of people around the world.
And to me, this story, very barbarically put, is looking at decisions that you've made and understanding the impacts it has on people and maybe even ramifications that you weren't even aware of, maybe some that you were aware of and maybe didn't care about the people that it impacted. It's forcing you to look at that. And rather barbarically, it's kind of a Christmas carol where we're transporting someone through time, through space to watch what real people are doing firsthand and getting that emotional impact and then going back to our present to maybe make decisions differently. I mean, that's basically how I view Christmas Carol.
Yeah, I think this one hits home a little bit harder because here you have somebody that has a lot more power. I know that Ebenezer had money, but he didn't have as much power and influence over potentially millions of people. His little group, sure. And that doesn't detract from it that he did finally change and make a difference in other people's lives. And changing one person's life is just as important as changing millions of people's lives. That's not my point. But I think that the young Tsar is trying to hit on a broader scope of the ramifications of our leaders' choices, and that sometimes they need to get down off their throne, come down into the trenches, get in the pit with us, and understand what real life is.
Right. And we can show them that this is the way. So let's move into our plot. It was Christmas Eve, and a young Tsar, recently married, worked diligently to raise taxes for the state. He signed papers to sell alcohol to enrich his kingdom and increased his troops so that he can enforce disciplinary actions on his people. Could you get any more of a Tolstoy setup than this?
No, sir. This is Tolstoy through and through. So
he returns late and accidentally falls asleep before seeing his wife. He believes that he is soon woken up by a man that he neither recognizes nor mistrusts. The man places his hand on his head and said, "This is the way." And the Tsar became unconscious. And the next thing the young Tsar realized is that he opened up his eyes and he was on an open field on Mandalore. Sorry.
Mandalore is unlivable. It's toxic because the Empire poisoned it.
I will stop now. I'm sorry. So they spotted two nearby fugitives running when a guard orders them to stop. When they don't, he shoots one of them, the unarmed fugitives, killing him. And the Tsar's companion tells him that the guard was enforcing some of the Tsar's policies that he had signed off on. The companion places his hand on the Tsar's head, and again, he goes unconscious. My tense is all over here with the script that I wrote. I need to redo this at some point in my life. Next, he is awoken in an office with a dead man from the field who has a wound in his side. And we all know that when you get a wound in the side, what happens to you in a Tolstoy piece?
You always die. Insert.
Death of Ivan Ilyich, Alyosha the Pot. You get hit in the side, you die. That's just the law. For the Tolstoy law. So also in the room with the dead body is a woman and her 2 small children trembling as they looked at the man. The governmental officials enter and ask the soldier from the previous scene if this was the man who shot him, and the soldier struggles through grief to speak clearly that it was the same.
I think here we start to see the first kind of cracks in the Tsar's policies, and we see for the first kind of contention to the Tsar's orders authority, where the soldier's feeling a little bit of grief here, and he's questioning the Tsar's authority, and the Tsar is then seeing this firsthand. He's like, whoa, what's that all about?
So he places his hand on his head, and they go to a new location. And there, a small boy of 9 dies of alcohol, suffering delirium tremors. And they talk about how crime has been suppressed where alcohol was made illegal. We know this wasn't taking place in Chicago, right?
No, sir.
Tolstoy just needed to live a little bit longer and see how
this really turns out.
Yeah. Prohibition's not really a thing that works everywhere, buddy.
I don't think it works anywhere.
They then teleport to a scene with a son beating a father, a younger peasant fighting with him, and a drunk peasant girl offering her body to officials. They are beasts, said the young Tsar. Then they go through a bunch of scenes of suffering and police-inflicted brutality. That's kind of where the story goes from here, and it's kind of heartbreaking. So the Tsar professes, but how can I put an end to all this evil? It is bound up with the very existence of the state. Is that the Tsar talking, or is that Tolstoy himself talking? I can't tell.
Yeah, that one's tough, right?
We'll get into that. The Tsar woke up from his believed dream, and he speaks with the official and the Tsarina about his dream. The official urges him that the people who are punished deserved it, and the people are wealthy enough. They are not poor like his dream. The Tsarina pushes him for more state control in the hands of the people, and the Tsar just to be the supreme direction. And then randomly we get the voice of God coming into the young Tsar's mind, telling him that basically he needs to pray and follow heavenly duties as well. So which of these 3 paths will he choose? The story will not be fully told for many years. End plot.
I actually liked the ending. I thought it was kind of ambiguous, but also does leave you with a shred of hope that maybe he would, quote, pick the right choice, whatever that may be.
The story. I tell you, so facing the evil actions the state inflicts upon people. That's the point of the story, no?
No, for sure. I think that Tolstoy is obviously trying to call out the Tsar here for what he has done, his pressures on his people. He's trying to do it very subtly, though. Not so much maybe sarcastically, but he's definitely saying, because if you look at the beginning of the story, he's like, the poor Tsar is working so hard, he never even gets a day off. And when he finally does, he just falls down exhausted in a delirium sleep. But then he's trying to point out all the faults of the Tsar along the story. So he's trying to keep himself from getting in trouble, but he's definitely punching up at that upper society and their issues with the masses of a whole.
Well, it's worth pointing out, too, that this is a young Tsar. Like, he just recently came into power. And you'll notice that Tolstoy even made a point that before he went to bed, what did he do?
He looks for his wife, doesn't he?
He changes back into the clothes that he wore before he became Tsar.
Oh, he changes clothes.
So he still has elements of being these people that he's about to witness in him. And he still puts on that persona after he's done being the Tsar, a newly appointed Tsar.
Oh, yeah, I like that he's being a face to something else, and maybe he's not making choices that he naturally would, but he's making choices he thinks people want him to make, or he's being forced by other individuals.
Tolstoy makes it very clear. We've got his representation of the people. We have a quote where he says, "This is the general condition of the people. The children are starving of degenerate families. The houses are full of animals, mind-numbing labor, submission, and sadness." So he paints a very destitute society for Russia at this point. And then when he talks about the state, he says, "Ministers, governors greedy, ambitious, and filled with vanity and concern for acquiring importance and instilling fear." And you'll notice that's kind of what the reason why they inserted words into the Tsar's mouth where they said he raised taxes to enrich the state. He added more power to the army so that they can punish those that break the law. Like, he's specifically attempting to richen and fatten his own pocket and strengthen his position more so than what's the welfare of my state. And here he's very clearly saying the welfare is terrible.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think if we look, this is, 1894. He's probably writing this a couple of years before, it's being published. And we see a major shift in Russia at this time. And people are very much anti-Tsar right now. And I think he feels empowered that he's like, hey, you're going to lose your throne here if you don't start making some smarter choices for the people as a whole, because you and your rich buddies are going to be pulled down. And I think he's trying to do it in a nice way. It doesn't come off that, but I think he's trying to be pretty respectful to the Tsar in power.
When the Tsar talks about not being directly responsible for the alcohol issues, one of the things that I struggled with was as a reader was Tolstoy is so direct and to the point. He's not really sarcastic. But how can I not take that line sarcastically? Where alcohol, like restriction of alcohol, has that ever worked out positively in any state? Like, I don't know enough about world culture throughout entire history, so correct me where I'm wrong. But most of the instances where we've tried to restrict it from a state control perspective, it did not go well.
No, 100%. And actually, if you look through history, that's one of the things that they actually encourage is to keep the masses drunk because it keeps them from worrying about the more important things in life and it keeps them quelled. The Romans did that tremendously by giving free bread, wine, and entertainment at the Colosseum to keep their masses controlled. So no, that's just the complete opposite of reality, which is very strange for Tolstoy to write it that way.
Do you think he believed it, or do you think he meant it sarcastically? Because that's one of the biggest points of contention that I have with the story is that presentation. Because Tolstoy, we know in terms of like the 1 Corinthians 8:13, therefore if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat lest I make my brother stumble. Tolstoy is very big on, okay, this might not be a sin, like let's say alcohol. He was very big on not drinking, but also if you were by a drunk, and drunkards were a much bigger problem in Russia. It's not just a stereotype. There is a higher alcoholism problem statistically. He was very big on, I shouldn't drink and tempt my brother into it. I kind of got a little bit of feelings from that regard in this respect, where he's kind of saying like, well, we shouldn't drink because it tempts so many of my alcoholic brothers from a biblical standpoint.
I could see that. If you look at it from the point of view of guilty by association, it's that idea of, you don't take an alcoholic to a bar, to a party, because you're going to tempt them. I can see that. But he does, maybe it's just the problem is that he doesn't do the sarcasm well, and that's why we're struggling to understand it.
Yeah, well, it's struggling for me to feel comfortable in the story, because the other thing that really bugged me a little bit was he uses the idiom, one may spoil the corn, but one could never change it to buckwheat, right? You can plant an apple seed, but it's always going to grow up to be an apple tree. You can't make it become a peach tree, right? There's a ton of different ways to take that idiom, whether you're taking it from Kung Fu Panda or from Leo Tolstoy from 19th century, right? So he presents that idiom, but the ending of the story ends with a choice. What way will our Tsar choose? He's pulled towards the worldview, Christian view of praying to God. He's pulled towards the things are okay, more power to the state that the Tsar is in, being pushed by the official, selfishly pushing for himself, right? And then you've got the wife that's pushing for more state control, and the Tsar just kind of leads them. I feel I have a hard time resolving this conflict of these solutions being presented to him and these idioms about how you just can't change things and things will always grow up to be a certain way.
I think Tolstoy here is trying to give the Tsar a message. I think that he's really writing almost like a self-help pamphlet for him, saying you have three choices. You can listen to God, you can listen to your wife, or you can listen to your rich buddies. And depending on which choice you make is going to define the rest of your life. And ultimately it does, right? As the Tsar will be killed and his entire family.
I would fine tune what you said there. He's not listening to the wife, I think. He's listening to the people, right? Putting more power in state, in the people's hands. It's kind of like the unitarist versus federalist approach for how you run your government, being thrown between the official and the wife, putting hands in the state people. And then there's God too, right? Making sure that I give time to God beyond just the earthly tasks is how I took that.
Tolstoy is a brave man. I mean, trying to tell a king, a czar, a pharaoh what to do is a dangerous task indeed.
Well, he was incredibly rich, probably the most famous Russian alive in this time, right? Like it was hard to touch him, but he walked a very fine line. And you'll notice, I couldn't help but wonder, is he wimping out? Like, is this ending with him being like, which way the Tsar chooses won't be told for 50 years? Is he writing this story for the current Tsar? Or is he not giving a finality to the story because he's scared of the current Tsar?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, if he could have predicted the future, I think maybe he would have helped him out a little bit more, because he doesn't need to be benefiting from this. He's rich, he's famous, he's powerful. Tolstoy himself doesn't need anything. But I think he does want the betterment for his people, and he does want to help guide, and be maybe a fourth choice. Because nowhere does it say that the Tsar should do what the Tsar thinks is best or wants, right? That's never really an option, which is different than what we see like in A Christmas Carol.
So at the end of the day, what the story becomes, instead of it being a redemptive, here's the right answer story, that's not what this becomes, right?
Right.
This becomes it's what the Tsar learns is it's his responsibility. What he chooses doesn't matter. What matters is that he learned he must take responsibility for his actions, and he must make that decision at this point of time. To me, which just isn't as powerful as maybe as that guiding light, I guess. But hey, I'm not the writer of the story, but it fell a little short of me just to be like, hey, you're responsible for your actions for the point of the story.
Well, I think I would add on there a little tiny bit is that he's responsible for his own actions, and as Tsar, his actions will have consequences and long-term and long-stretching ramifications to all of Russia. And I think that's what Tolstoy is trying to do, is like, bro, you're young, but you've got to start making some snapshot decisions now, because people are dying because of your actions or lack of actions.
Right. You're not just Ebenezer Scrooge in charge of a few employees' lives. You're in charge of an entire country, which maybe goes back to that point that we just got to. Maybe he is kind of trying to guide. I don't know. Was there a Tsar that just recently came into power around when the story was published? I guess I don't know.
No, Nicholas II becomes Tsar in 1894. So I think that he's literally writing it to this young Tsar that's just come into power to try to help guide him. And it's interesting that we can look back on it as historians and know that he's the last Tsar, because it will fall. World War I happens and they become communist and are democratic today. So kind of interesting how maybe if Nicholas II had listened to Tolstoy, things would have gone very different in world history, because that would have been altered, changing for how influential Russia / becoming the USSR will be in world conflicts.
Yeah, was it 1917?
Yeah, 1917 will be the term.
So he writes out, by the way, The Young Tsar by Leo Tolstoy. Everybody should check the story out.
Yeah, 1894 to 1917. I mean, that's a pretty long reign, but I mean, he said 50 years, we'll know what happens, and he doesn't make it, but a little over 20.
He might as well have called the story to Nicholas II.
This is what you do, or you're going to be done by 1917. Like, I have a time machine. This is the way to not die.
To the reigning Tsar of Mandalore, signed Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah. I can bring you in cold, or I can bring you in warm.
Well, all right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on the journey today. If you enjoy literature discussions like this, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. We post videos every Monday and Thursday. Una out.
Peace.